Okay, continuing on our journey of U.S. expansion and becoming a world power. Right, our third topic, the last topic we're going to look at is kind of how the United States acts in our very own backyard, which would be Latin America. Right, we talked about Cuba, we talked about the Spanish-American War. Okay, now we're going to look at how the U.S. really makes its presence felt, right, in terms of protecting Latin America or, keeping that as our backyard, our little domain. Okay, our interest in Latin America really kind of starts with the idea of easy access or easy trade with the Pacific Ocean. All right, we want to be able to have that access, that quick access to the Pacific Ocean, even though we have it in California and Washington, on the West Coast, right? Most of the population in the United States was located on the East Coast. That's where a lot of the major trade centers were. So the United States needed to find a way to get from the East Coast to the Pacific, okay, in a very short period of time. So the Panama Canal, the idea here was to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, right? So this is work pack question one. Okay, a canal here would, I'll get the map up for you. A canal here would actually, almost cut the amount of time in half to get from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, and the U.S. would have to be able to get our battleships, our Navy, right, very quickly to the other side of the country. All right, Spanish-American War showed us, right, how valuable it was to be able to, to control the seas, to control the ocean. Okay, so this works. So I keep flying right through that. Sorry. Right. So work pack two is in terms of how did Roosevelt, who's president at the time, how did he go about getting the land to build this canal? Because everything kind of starts with a canal. So we're going to kind of jump ahead here in order to start, if that kind of makes sense a little bit. Right. So the land that was most ideally suited for the canal, actually, Colombia wasn't going to let us build a canal at all. France actually had tried it years before, right, and it was very difficult because of the disease and the jungle, right, and they actually didn't want Colombia didn't want the United States to be able to build a canal, right? So what Roosevelt does is he supports a revolution, right, a group of rebels that wanted to break away from Colombia and start their own country. Roosevelt ends up using the military to support them, which is an example of big stick diplomacy, which we're going to look at here in a second, right? And then, Panama is going to be created. They allow us to build a canal. So Roosevelt actually, he referred to it as, I took the land, right, to build the canal. So this was the famous cartoon of him, digging the first shovelful. All right, you can kind of see him larger than life. You can see the ships coming in behind him, right? And this would be the country of Panama. And this is Colombia over here. And you can see he's kind of throwing, that's a weird arrow, all right? He's kind of throwing the dirt towards Colombia. All right, and then in return for their independence, Panama then allows the United States to build a canal through their country. Okay, and it was kind of painted Roosevelt as kind of a bully, right? Because he wasn't afraid to use the military to get his way. But as we're going to see, that's his foreign policy, right? It's called big stick diplomacy. Okay, the stick would represent the military. You use the military whenever you need to. All right, and then obviously, a couple years later, the United States does reimburse Colombia for the land. So, building the canal, we're going to look at it a little bit in class. We're going to be doing some activities specifically dealing with the construction, right? But I talked to you about the disease, the dangerous terrain, okay? You're looking at the largest, at the time, the largest man-made engineering process, engineering feat, right, the world had ever seen. Right, it did opens the first year of World War I, which is kind of ironic. Now the United States needs, or the world kind of needs that global transportation or transition system. Right. My map cut that off there. Right, but between $350 and $380 million. We don't need to know the ins and outs of the canals in terms of your work pack. Right, we'll look at it more in class. Right, here would be just a couple images. Okay, this is showing you a map of the actual canal. Okay, so here would be Panama. You can see this is the narrowest point, right? So now ships can come through the canal and get out here into the Pacific. In Colombia, there's Panama. Panama created because of Roosevelt's big stick foreign policy. And here's a picture of Roosevelt operating one of the cranes, right, during the construction process. All right, this is just kind of another map. You can see here's the east coast of the United States. Here's the Pacific Ocean, right? If we didn't have the canal, the U.S. would have to go all the way this way and around South America, which would have taken way too long. All right, so the canal now opens up the door to open door policy. See what I just did there? That was China. Right, this now opens the door up to the rest of Latin America. Okay, and now there's all kinds of trade goods there, all kinds of investment opportunities, right? Opportunities for the United States to make even more money, right? To have more of a global presence. Okay, so now the United States becomes really interested in how to protect all of these investments, right? So we start setting up American businesses in all these different countries, okay? And then any problems in those areas would be a threat to American businesses. So the U.S. had to find a way to protect all of the investment that they've done in this particular region. Okay, so they fall back on a couple different pieces of foreign policy, right? The first one, right, Work Pact 3, the first one is the Monroe Doctrine, which Roosevelt, that was Monroe Doctrine. James Monroe was the fourth president, right, after Jefferson. So that's all the way back in the 1800s. Okay, Roosevelt kind of falls back on the Monroe Doctrine, which is in your vocabulary list. It was something you learned in 7th grade. Okay, Roosevelt builds upon that. He adds what's referred to as the Roosevelt Corollary, okay, which basically says that the United States can get involved whenever it feels it needs to in order to protect American interests. So he's not afraid to use the military to protect, right, other countries. All right, and the Monroe Doctrine was aimed at preventing European nations from setting up colonies, right? But now they're all independent nations, so there's no colonies being set up. But Roosevelt kind of adapted that, or transformed it to protect, to not protect, to apply it to whatever situation he thought he might need to. Right, and here's a couple examples of the Monroe Doctrine. Okay, we know this guy here is Uncle Sam because of the beard and the clothes, right? And it's essentially cutting off or drawing a line between the Eastern Hemisphere and the Western Hemisphere, right? And these would be all European countries here, European nations, and the United States is simply telling them, like, this is our area. You're not allowed to come here and set up colonies, right? Roosevelt takes that and says, you can't get involved in the Western Hemisphere. We will get involved to protect things. Right, so this is Work Pact question 4. This is the Roosevelt Corollary. This is where the actual wording comes from. Right, it basically says the United States is now the policeman, right, of the Western Hemisphere. We're in charge. We'll take care of everything. We'll make sure that everything goes smoothly. It's also referred to as big stick diplomacy. Okay, which basically means we have no problem using the military if need be. So this is kind of a funny political cartoon showing Roosevelt, okay, with this giant, the giant cannon on the Great White Fleet, which we'll talk about in class as well, which basically protects Latin America from any involvement from the Eastern Hemisphere, meaning the United States is in charge. We won't let any other countries, do anything without our permission. Right, a couple other pictures of Roosevelt. Okay, obviously the big giant billy club. Okay, that would be big stick diplomacy. Okay. Once again, using the military to protect your interests, or using the military whenever you feel you need to. All right, now his vice president, who becomes president after he's done, is Taft. Taft goes a kind of a different direction, and he uses what's referred to as dollar diplomacy, which means, just like it says, okay, using money to influence or to protect American interests. All right, essentially, you help set up strong economies in these countries, and then in return, those countries will kind of follow your lead and help you. Right now, this kind of backfires because the rest of the world looks at the United States as a greedy country, because we're investing so much money and kind of adding strings. Like, we'll give you all this money, but you'll have to do this, and it kind of makes us look like a big giant greedy bully telling all these poor developing countries what to do. Okay, and then we come back to the Platt Amendment and the Foraker Act. In this particular unit, we talked about it a lot in this particular topic. We talked about an awful lot in topic 2, but obviously this would be part of dollar diplomacy. So for your work pack question, you need to just go back to your vocab list and be able to pull it out from there. Okay. This would be a pretty interesting chart showing you some of the intervention in the first part of the 20th century. Excuse me. Okay. All right. Now here would be a key word: intervention. Right. This means to get involved. All right. If you have an intervention with your friends, right, peer leader, something like that, they're getting involved. They're helping you. So these are all the different dates. These are the locations, and this is how the United States gets involved. Right. And you can see all of these have to do with the military. So they would all be kind of examples of the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. All right, and this would just be that same thing, but now in a visual term. So you can see the United States, okay, this would all be considered Latin America, right? And it's all under the jurisdiction, so to say, of the United States. Right, and then we'll finish off with this fun picture. Even we will have looked at it in class already, right? But this shows the United States, Uncle Sam, again with the beard and the striped shirt, okay, and all of the other global powers. You can see Japan, Italy, Great Britain, France, Germany, Russia, Japan. All right, did I say Japan? I must have said Japan twice. All right, here we are playing cards, and if you look at some of the chips that you can definitely see, here's Cuba here, here's Puerto Rico. Okay, you can see that would be the United States, taking all these different colonies from all these old countries. Okay, all right, come to class with anything you didn't quite understand yet, right, and we'll be sure to clear it up for you.